it's my understanding that you want to know a little bit about my office. And so it is a pleasure for me to do that. I should start out once upon a time, since it's been a while since I've been here. Lincoln-Lancaster County was considering building a 120-bed juvenile services center. Instead, you and the county took a good look at that, and the suggestions you made resulted in what we now call graduated sanctions. Instead, we built an 80-bed facility instead of a 120-bed facility. We gave judges lots of options, like day and evening reporting. We gave them the electronic monitoring, Project Hire, many different programs for them to choose from instead of putting kids in detention. The programs grew. The county was spending nearly $2 million placing kids out of state. Now I don't think they spend $200,000. The Human Services hired, finally, a director for juvenile justice, and we hired Sarah Hoyle, who I will tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt is the best juvenile justice coordinator in the entire state. We're very well blessed. This afternoon, Sarah is going to just take a little bit of time and bring you up to date on the issues that Lincoln now faces as we top 300,000 people, as our diversity increases, and as the number of essential community partnerships continue to grow. Sarah?
Okay, I just wanted to start out by telling you a little bit about our office. Over the last 3 years, our office, the Juvenile Justice Office, has grown immensely. We've added over $1 million in funding to this office. We've added 2 full-time staff members, mostly paid through by grant funds. With direct services and collaboration with our community partners, we've reached out to over 1,000 youth annually. Just some of the efforts to talk about. Reentry is one of the grants that we received. Reentry is working with kids, the highest level kids that we have in the state of Nebraska, as they leave the facilities in both Kearney and Geneva and return to Lincoln. Basically, it sets up wraparound services for these kids as they come back into the Lincoln community. It provides them with a transition specialist to help them along the way. It helps them find employment. We also have family advocates that work with the family, because we know one of the most stressful times for families is when youth, after being placed out of the home for months after months, when they re-enter that home again. So these family advocates are engaged with the family, helping the family prepare as they come back from the facilities in both Kearney and Geneva. This particular grant that we received a planning grant that started out with $50,000 to plan for how we would do this project. And then the additional 3 years was $1 million funding. We were one of 5 sites to receive this grant, so we were feeling pretty fortunate that we were chosen for that. The 2 positions that I spoke to earlier that we added a pre-adjudication community services position. And this position does 2 different things. It also deals with gang prevention and intervention. But the pre-adjudication piece is huge. This is something that we have talked about, have worked on for over a decade. And it was just a matter of getting everybody at the table together to agree that we would do this and that we could do this. And basically what it does is it makes an option at the point of intake into detention for kids. So when kids come into detention, they're not like adults. They're not eligible for bond. They don't get a bond put on them when they're in juvenile court. So they sit there often until they see a judge. And this particular program, the pre-adjudication program, sets up a system where these kids, after they're screened by our probation department, if they're appropriate to be released into the community and there's no safety risk there, they can be released either to the shelter, to home on a supervision program, or to home on an electronic monitor. So we're pretty excited that that program got started and is underway. And then the second piece of that position is the gang prevention intervention specialist coordinator, and this is working really collaboratively with the police department. And the project's called Operation Tipping Point, and that's the police department named that because they said that's where we're at with gangs in Lincoln. And we're at a tipping point where we can either reach out and collaborate with community partners and really do something to prevent more gang spread within our community. And so that's what we're doing. Basically, as referrals come in, we bring them to a table. We have a number of community providers sitting around a table, from Boys and Girls Club, Lincoln Public Schools, a number of agencies. And we bring kids up at the table and say, this kid has ties to a gang, this kid's known to be an associate. How can we get them plugged into your program? How can we work with them to make sure that they don't go more into gang involvement? So that's Operation Tipping Point. Then we also, the second position we have is the early assessment specialist. And this individual basically screens youth who have their first brush with law enforcement, the diversion eligible kids. And basically they call the youth and the parent and they do an assessment with them. And the assessment's called the Nebraska Youth Screen. They walk through several questions, and then at the end they basically ask the parent, what have you done? What happened after this kid got arrested? What were the steps that you took to discipline the children? Because if you think back to when you were a kid, oftentimes what your parents did are far, far, far more reaching and effective than what the system can do and what taxpayers' money can be used for. And lots of times that's what we'll find out from kids is, yeah, mom or dad took my iPhone for a month and I'm never, ever, ever gonna do this again. and so then that is typed up in a recommendation and sent to the county attorney's office. And we've had evaluation after evaluation of this program because it's being evaluated by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention as an evidence-based programming. So numerous studies have been done in it, and we found that it actually does keep kids out of the system. And let's see, and basically this program talks to over 500 kids annually, so there's a lot of kids coming through our office being screened for this. And then just to mention, we work with a lot of community partners. We offer restorative programming through juvenile justice, victim offender mediation programming. We've partnered with the Religious Affinity Action Group and reached out to churches and trained people within the churches on how to facilitate mediations between juveniles and the person that they've committed the crime against. And this is something that we found to be really impactful for juveniles. It puts a face on the crime and it helps them understand how the crime impacted other people beyond them and their family. And then we've also reached out to numerous communities to provide cultural programming for our Sudanese youth. We've asked our Sudanese providers where they thought the best programming would be and where their community would go for help. And they chose the Salvation Army, and we found this to be a really effective place for them. The Salvation Army offers after-school programming and teen night. They pick up our children, take them there, return them home. They offer a parent group for our Sudanese families, so parents learn about LPS, the Pinnacle system where LPS teaches the parents how they can get online and check attendance for our kids. They also, right now, they're working with the parents to teach them about our traditions that we have around the holiday, to teach them about Thanksgiving and what that looks like here. They've also had discussions about Santa Claus and what their kids might be talking about with Santa and what that means and those kind of traditions. So everything I've talked about is pretty much funded not through city, not through county, but through grant funding. Our grant funding has grown, like I said, over $1 million over the last 3 years. The Crime Commission, we've received an extra $500,000 due to legislation, $500,000 annually due to legislation that was just passed. So we're looking at different programming for that. We recently hosted a conference with over 400 people in attendance that talked about evidence-based programming in juvenile justice and how to write a community plan. We've helped other counties do that. And we recently sent a team of people from Lincoln Police Department, Judiciary, County Attorney, to Georgetown to be certified on reducing ethnic and racial disparities within our system. So we're pretty excited about that because that was a process where we were chosen as a site to go through the certification. So, and then lastly, our truancy diversion program is something that we've been excited about too. It started out at Park Middle School with Judge Ryder. And basically it's modeled after a program in Louisville in addition to drug courts. It runs similar to how a drug court would run, but it's in the school. The judge actually goes to the school, meets with the kids within the school. If the youth completes the program, then their charges are dismissed, everything's closed. We have designated social workers within the schools that work with the youth and the family to do individual case planning with them and meet with them every day to make sure that they're follow up with the youth and family if they're not showing up and so forth. This last year we added Goodrich and Keller Middle School, and then Judge Ryder added Lincoln High, North Star, and Northeast. And the additional schools we added was a strong collaboration between the county attorney's office, the judiciary, and then us with getting the funding. And UNO did a study of Judge Ryder's first truancy court at Park and found that there was an 80% reduction in truancies among those kids. So we were excited with that program and that process. So I know my time's up. I'm sorry. I just want
No,
thank
it's
you.
great.
Thank you very much for your support of juveniles. And I feel blessed to be able to work with elected officials who know that if we invest in our juveniles now, and we know that they're our future, so that's the way to go. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Sarah is in the middle of a meeting upstairs, and so if you have any questions about juvenile justice, now would be a really good time to ask her. None? Okay.
Can you expect that the grant funding will be renewed? A lot of times grants are given with the expectation that after 2 or 3 years you find another source of funding. So what can we expect going forward with some of these important programs?
The reentry grant is coming to the end of its funding cycle in June of 2015. So we're working with community partners on how they can best sustain what programming we've set up for those reentry kids. And then the $500,000 that I talked about through community aid funding, that funding is funding that comes through the state, and it's predetermined based on the population of youth we have in our community. So that funding is secure as state funding can be.
As everybody laughs. Good answer. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Juvenile justice is one area in our office, but as you can tell, it's a very large one, and when Sarah goes on vacation, I die, because then it lands on my desk. There's a few other things we do. I'll mention a couple of them. The Human Services Federation was originally started by Jane Ford and George Hannigan and my predecessor, Bob Clark. Today it has 140 nonprofit agencies. Over the years, my office has provided some interim backbone support for that organization. We've led projects like the Salary Benefit Survey, and we've served on committees that make the Federation much stronger. We also have a New Americans Task Force. It meets monthly. Every month we know exactly what refugees are coming into this community and where they're coming from and what the makeup of their families are. The schools, of course, are the greatest beneficiary of that information, but so is housing, and so is LPD and a number of others. We right now have an incredible website thanks to the city. Justin, whose last name I can never pronounce, but Justin from the city helped us. What is it? Yes, phenomenal guy. He gave us a great deal of time and information. And if you would go to the website that we just sent you before this meeting, you're going to take a look at it. And that website will be up in Spanish yet, probably the beginning of next year, and then we hope for it to be up in Arabic as well. It's an incredible resource for our New Americans. We meet as a New Americans Task Force at noon the third Friday of every month at the Health Department, and you are all welcome to attend at any time. There's an open agenda, and if you want, our office can send you that agenda to take a look at. It is a table of high-energy conversations, lots of ideas and problem solving that occurs every single month. This year, we have piloted the business tour. Some of you have taken on opportunity to attend that and to jump on board. The pilot was this year, and we learned a lot. We had a north tour and a south tour. We've learned that sometimes we added too many businesses, and sometimes the transportation was too far apart, but we learned, and by next year we'll have that ironed out. We will have 3 tours next year, a south tour, a north tour, and a market tour. Basically, it shows the people who are on the tour, which will be open to the public, how rich we are in terms of our refugee resettlement. The businesses that we have visited tell an incredible story of the people who have been here, how they got here, what they had when they got here, and what they have now. And I think the people on the bus that went the first time as our pilot group really enjoyed it. Larry, and you were there. Carl, you were there. Any comments did you want to make on those?
I think the overwhelming gratitude expressed was really impressive, and it was interesting to see the generations of family working at M. Suits Taylor's.
Yes.
His grandson was there at the store learning and watching alongside his son and daughter-in-law.
Yep.
And
Carl?
Yeah, I guess we're on different tours because I didn't go to MSITS. I went on the Central and I guess mostly Central. So that was, just fascinating to learn more about the different communities, the people that have, taken this risk with their venture and the community that they're serving, and also learning from some of the other groups and individuals in the community that are assisting them, like one of the aides to the mayor things
Right.
that he's doing with the Karen community.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
presence of churches, the important
Mhm.
role that churches have
Right.
played in helping a lot of families.
Well, next year we hope to make that business tour open to the public. We've refined it a little bit. We think we can take as many as 30 on every tour, and we hope that it continues. I think it's a great opportunity for us to learn. We are also planning a multicultural event in 2016. You say, well, gee, that's far away. It is, except that when we started talking about getting schools involved and their choral groups and their bands and the church groups, it's going to take us that long to organize it and make it the kind of event that we want. So it will be a fantastic, phenomenal program in 2016. In terms of grants, yes, we write to the Crime Commission. We get money from the Crime Commission. We also do other state and local grants. Right now, counting Sarah's money and the money that comes into our office as well as our budget, we're at about $4.6 million. I'll give you an example of a federal grant. We had a substance abuse prevention grant that went for 10 years at $100,000 a year. That was $1 million, and you didn't just get it, you had to earn it every year. And so I think we did a fairly good job with that. And once upon a time, we also received a $200,000 to $300,000 grant from the Office of Refugee Resettlement because we were in fact resettling so many refugees. Also, at the request of the city, Human Services took over low-income transportation, and we now have low-income bus passes all over the city. The Keno Fund has been a great thing to happen in my office. To give you very brief history, when you first started Keno, the city and the county decided to start Keno, I tried to point out some of the human service elements that happen when you have gambling come into a community. I wrote 2 papers for the state legislature on the same thing, what happens when gambling takes over a community. The human service needs are quite great, and the research is out there. So what I asked at the time was for 5% of the gross proceeds to come into my office for prevention work. The city council and the county board agreed to that. We set up a Keno advisory committee, and that committee came to you with a request that said we would like to give away 60% of that money. And then we would take 40% of that very small pot of money and put it over here, and it would just grow. And everybody said, sure, sure, knowing that it was a very small pot of money. Now, patience has never been on my resume. I'm not a very patient person. But I can't believe that by putting that little bit of money away every time, it has now reached $1 million. And your $1 million was invested in a city fund last Friday by Steve Hubko. So I'm very excited about that. If I had a bucket list, that would have been one I'm very proud to check off. The rest of the money will continue to come in, and we will continue to give it away. Roughly, that looks like about $150,000 a year. The last pot of money that I would talk about is our JBC money, because that's $500,000 of that is yours. The total JBC budget is $1.2 million, and the city has religiously put in $500,000 every single year, which, believe me, when years get tight, that is really appreciated. Our city is also growing, and it's now over 300,000. And with that growth comes higher poverty. With that growth comes new people who need to learn to live in this community because they haven't lived anywhere in the United States before. With that growth comes some antisocial behaviors from gangs, turf wars, money wars, drug wars, sex trade wars, you can name it. And we need to step up and keep Lincoln one of the best places to live. To do that takes money. And I guess as I walk out the door here, I would really, really appreciate it if as we come around next year to JBC, as religious as that $500,000 has been, if you would consider increasing that next year to meet some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with in this community. The county puts in the bulk of it, but I will tell you, when I came here 28 years ago, that JBC fund was $2.2 million. It is now $1.2 million. And as that money went down, the issues in the city continue to grow. Again, appreciate the $500,000, believe me, but perhaps next year you could consider for the first time raising it a little bit. My office is supposed to be the eyes and ears of elected officials like yourselves regarding an ever-changing landscape in human services. The door has always been open for any suggestions you would have, and I'd like to say thank you for your support from me and my staff over the years. Thank you. Carl?
Well, thank you. 28 years of doing this and coordinating things. And you've got a month, 5 weeks?
37 days.
Okay, who's counting? All right.
You asked.
All right, so I'm kind of worried, right? I'm not worried about you, I'm worried about us. And what's going to happen after Kit leaves this
37 days.
position? And
You know,
when you're
Carl-
talking about the grant applications, who's responsible for those things? Help us out.
Well, here's what I know. I know that if I walked out the door today, there are plenty of people in this community who have the skills to walk in and take my job. You know them by name or by reputation. As I say that, there may be people in other cities who have done what I do and may come here with new ideas. I don't know who's going to apply. I do know that the job description has changed a bit. I think that's a good thing. Juvenile justice took a lot of building time over those 28 years. But as you can tell from Sarah's description, it's rocking and rolling. It doesn't need a lot of management and oversight. It needs somebody to keep it going and to keep doing the grant work. So that allows the person in the human services job a little bit more time. Over the years, particularly this year, I have been working with veterans programs, and it's been exciting. And I grow a lot in what I learn from the veterans that are coming back, particularly from Iraq and Afghanistan. The work that I've done with them has been exciting, and I think I'd like to see the veterans component continue. GA is also, general assistance is also a component that probably should be under human services. I used to go to those meetings and then they conflicted with others, so I didn't. But in reality, the whole concept of general assistance is probably a human service issue. So as the job goes out, I believe that those two have been ultimately added like after 6 months, so a person can get acclimated to the office and then maybe begin adding those things. You've got good people in this community, and you've got good people, I'm sure, that are looking at moving to this community. And you have people who have been here, been away, and want to come back. So I think with those three elements, you're going to have a great pool to choose from. I'm not worried.
Having worked in that group for 7 years, almost 8, I would say that you are right to a certain extent. There are certainly qualified people out there. I think we'll be hard pressed to find anybody who understands how to leverage money like you leverage money, and I think that's an extreme benefit to the city that the city probably won't realize that they have until it's gone, because it's I'm amazed what you can do when somebody gives you $100,000, what you can turn that into. Secondarily, I'm not sure that the next person we find has the tenacity, and I mean that in a very, very good way. I know there are people who take that wrong. The truth is that things don't get done unless somebody continues to write it and write it and write it until they get it done. I know from having not necessarily done some things quickly enough that Kit's quick to remind you that you said you would or you will. And if for no other reason, then you don't want Kit calling you. That's a good reason to finish, and that's a huge plus. Believe me. You will be missed, and thank you for. We are a much better city because you were here, and I doubt whether any of us will leave our positions and have somebody actually in the Lincoln Journal-Star write an excellent and a well-deserved editorial. I'm pretty sure some of us will get editorials when we leave. They'll be well deserved too, but they probably won't be quite as eloquent and speak to what you positive and speak to what you do. So thank you very much.
That editorial was a total surprise, and I greatly appreciate the journalist.
Which is why it's important, because if somebody expects that at the end of their career, they probably weren't the person that should have been in that job in the first place. So, Thank you very much. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Thank you.